Hi, this is Uri Strauss, and this video is to demonstrate 6 common reasons why in Bubble you might be expecting some text to render and it does not render where you expected. Not just text but other elements, but I'm using text to illustrate. So on this page, you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and an empty box here. So there's really 6 elements we're going to talk about. If you hit preview and you look at the page, you only see 1, and I'm going to make it invisible. So at this point we have 6 invisible elements on this page. Each one is invisible for a different reason, and we're going to go through them. And this is maybe some people will be educated by this, but it might just be a reminder for a lot of people. I know it happens to me that for really obvious reasons text doesn't render, and I sometimes have to spend 5 or 10 minutes figuring out why. You also see it on forums a lot. It's a very common question. Why doesn't this render? And often the answer is a very obvious thing that the user has overlooked. So I hope this video is helpful in resolving these issues. So reason number 1, you see that this text box is empty, but it's supposed to say the text is too big to render, and all this means is that there's a mismatch between the size of the text and the size of the text box. It's too big. Now this issue only arises, obviously you can resolve it by changing the size of the text box or the size of the text itself, but it really only arises if this box here is checked, cut off content, if the element is not tall enough. So you'll see that if you uncheck this box and we hit preview, the text renders. So that's reason number 1 why it might not render. Reason number 2 has to do with this checkbox here, not this one. This element is visible on page load. If this is not checked, then by default the text is invisible. You can make it visible conditionally through a workflow or whatever, but the simple solution is to check this element is visible on page load, and you'll see that if we do a preview, the text shows up. Now situation number 3 is related. Here the text itself is visible on page load, but it's inside of a container, this empty group, that is not visible on page load, and the contained element, the text box here, will take on the properties of the container. So even though this text box is marked visible by default, it will not be visible because of the group that it's in. So the way to fix this is to check this box. I should say that this one, for me at least, has been incredibly frustrating once or twice, because I had a container that I was not even aware was on a page. It was a very busy page with lots of stuff in it. If I remember correctly, I accidentally created the container and put the text box in it and then couldn't figure out why the text was not visible. So this will be a reminder to always check for invisible containing elements. So number 4 is just conditional. So as you can see here, if you click make invisible, it becomes invisible, and that's because this text is by default visible, as you can see here, but it is conditionally invisible. So we have a condition here that says if this custom state has the value of yes, then this text is not visible, which is because the visible box is not checked. Probably doesn't need any more explanation. Just make sure that you didn't activate a workflow that inadvertently made your text invisible. So that's number 4. Numbers 5 and 6 have more to do with the database. So number 5, we have a dynamic display here. The program does a search for an element of type private text and displays its text. And the reason this doesn't work is privacy conditions. So if we go to data and we go to privacy conditions, this is the type of private text. It's visible to the creator under certain circumstances that don't apply here. So we are here in the default permissions. And although view all fields is marked as visible, find this in searches is not marked as, well, it's not visible, it's private. So this is marked currently as private by virtue of not being checked. If we check it, then it's not private, and now we should be able to view it. And there's a private text. This text is private. We have changed the privacy condition. You see a lot of people falling for this one, or not being aware of the privacy basis for something not being viewable. And finally, and this might seem like a real duh situation, if there's a dynamic display of an item that just is not created in the database or is not connected in the database appropriately, then it's obviously not going to be visible. In this case, it's the current user's the text of the current user's private text, and we will discover, and I believe we're running this as this on my email. If we go to the user, we will discover that there is no private text here. I had meant to connect this to a private text, but I didn't. So we fix it by adding the private text. And when we do that and we preview, assuming I'm running as the right user, and I am, this text should be visible. Now, like I said, this might seem really obvious, and yet this happened to me recently, and I'll tell you why. The reason is I was using Bubble's default reusable group for, reusable element for login and sign up, and I didn't modify it. I was just using it, to test the database, to test my app. And Bubble's default sign up does not prompt the user to enter a name. So I had a workflow where I wanted to display the name, but I'd never been prompted to enter it, and I could not figure out, it took me 5 or 10 minutes to figure out why the name was not displaying, and the answer turned out to be, oh, duh, I never created the name because I wasn't prompted to. So these are your 6 common reasons why an element might not display when you expect it to display. I hope this has been useful.